Hi, this is your host Sapnil Bhartiya and welcome to TFI Let's Talk. Today we have with us Justin Borgman, co-founder and CEO of Starburst. Justin, it's great to have you on the show.
Great to be here.
It's my pleasure to talk to you today. We have covered Starburst a lot in past, so it's really great to have you on the show to also understand the basic idea behind the company that you had, the problem that you saw, which made you feel like, hey, let's try to solve this problem, which led to the creation of the company. So talk about the story of the company.
My co-founders are the creators of an open source project called Trino. And Trino was originally created at Facebook, and it was originally called Presto back then. Today it's known as Trino, but it's essentially how Facebook and many of the other largest internet companies in the world analyze their data. And at its core, it's a query engine. It's like the top half of the database. It allows you to query data in whatever format it may be in and wherever it lives. And so it was originally used with Facebook's Hadoop environment, which was their de facto data warehouse. And it's actually how LinkedIn, Airbnb, Netflix, Lyft, so many of the largest technology companies in the world do their data warehousing today, leveraging open formats in a data lake for storage and getting great performance benefits out of that. And that project has grown dramatically since it was first created a little over 10 years ago. Starburst is the company, the commercial company behind it. And we sell an enterprise edition as well as a cloud version that makes it just very easy to take advantage of the power of this technology.
Can you talk about the challenges that are associated with data when it comes to the formats or vendor-specific SQL syntax? So talk about those problems that you see that customers face. They might get comfortable with that, but you do know that in long term, they do not want to deal with those problems.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I mean, first of all, I agree with your point. Whether we call it the new oil or maybe the oxygen that we breathe, it's essential to everything that we do. And every business that we run is now a data-driven business. I'm sure even your own business is data-driven. We're data-driven. I need to know what territories to put new sales reps into. I need to know how are customers using my products, right? Everything is really about data at the end of the day to make the best possible decisions. And that becomes even more important in the era of AI when we ask machines to start making some of those decisions. So it's absolutely essential. And I think you hit on a really important point. How and where we store that data actually matters. And the reason that it matters is because if we store it in a proprietary format in a traditional database or traditional data warehouse, we're kind of locked into that particular vendor. And this is one of the reasons the internet companies came up with technologies like Trino in the first place, was because for them, their data volumes and the necessity to utilize that data was growing at a rate that was faster than even their own revenue growth. And so if they had to put it all into a proprietary database, they would have gone bankrupt. Like their businesses would not have been viable. So they needed a way to scale out this infrastructure in a way that was going to allow them to run a profitable business. And that set them on this journey to start to develop some of these open source technologies. And I think there's an important element here from database history. If we go back 40 years, to Oracle and Teradata and IBM DB2, for decades, we've stored data in the database itself in proprietary storage. But and that has led to that level of lock-in. But that's no longer the case. Today we have these open formats, Parquet files, Avro files, ORC files, and now even newer, more modern ones like Iceberg, which allow you to even modify that data, not just store it, but do updates and deletes on that data in a data lake that really give you the benefit of owning your own data, not having any one vendor own that data, but actually you yourself owning that data, which gives you then the flexibility to choose what engine am I going to use to query and analyze that. And I think that's a really big deal that's really impacting the market today.
As you talk about the whole landscape, can you also talk about how does open source changes the whole kind of engagement whether it's vendors like even hyperscalers who are doing things themselves, that's their own database. It can be proprietary, not proprietary, doesn't really matter. Or for other players who are leveraging either on-prem or on public cloud, or even their own private cloud. So talk about how open source democratizes, makes it more accessible, and then of course the impact can also be on the resources, the cost. Of course there's a cost associated with open source because you need teams to work on that, so it's different. But let's talk about how open source solves some of those problems.
Yeah, so I think at its core, leveraging open source technologies gives you as a customer, as a user, what I like to call optionality. And optionality just means the benefit of having options, essentially, which could mean that you're going to run it all entirely yourself. And that's the way many of those internet companies choose to do it. They have large teams, as you said, that can run Trino, that know how Iceberg works, can do ingest, build all these capabilities. Or you may choose to use a vendor like let's say Starburst in this case, and run it in our cloud hosted solution where we take a lot of that complexity away. The key though is you still have the optionality. Even if you use a vendor for that technology, you always have the option to go back to the open source. And that option is what gives you that freedom. That means that, if at some point in your company's journey, the vendor that you're buying software from is charging you too much money, you have an off ramp. You have an opportunity to go back and leverage the open source directly without a major migration project, without being really locked in. And so that's the beauty of open source. Another benefit, by the way, is that you get an entire community that's essentially rooting for your success. Not just the vendor who has a vested interest in your success, but also the entire other community of users of that open source project. And they're contributing features and they're making the software better. Like, for example, in the case of Trino, the geospatial functions were actually created by the ride sharing companies. And today, almost every single ride sharing company in the world leverages Trino because they've invested in these geospatial functions that they need for their type of business. So you get the benefit of that. We didn't actually create those geospatial functions. The community did, but you get the benefit of that. And that's another great advantage of leveraging technology that has a vibrant open source community. You're going to get the benefit of thousands of participants in that community, which is a great thing.
What role does Starburst play to give this flexibility of open source to companies who want to leverage it without also bringing the complexity and the cost, which is by default associated with day-to-day operations of open source?
At Starburst, we really have two products that we offer the market. One is called Starburst Enterprise. That's a self-managed product, meaning you run it yourself, but it comes with a whole host of enterprise capabilities, better performance, better security features, something we call warp speed, which is a caching technology, a whole host of extra connectors to different data sources. So it's an enterprise edition of the open source. That's called Starburst Enterprise. And you can run that on-prem, in the cloud, across multiple clouds, however you want to do it. We also have a product called Galaxy, and Galaxy is cloud hosted. And that takes away all the infrastructure management components of it. So you can run this with a very, very small team. And you basically just point to your data and then you can query it and analyze it very easily. And so that really speaks to making the open source technology very consumable for everyone from a smaller enterprise to a larger enterprise and everything in between. And then I think to your point about costs, by the way, you're absolutely right that traditional cloud data warehouses have increased in cost over time. I think that's something that people maybe didn't fully expect when they first got invested in them, but we've actually seen this movie before. I mean, this is exactly what happened 40 years ago with the introduction of the database and the data warehouse. I used to work at Teradata. People would complain about how expensive Teradata became and how monolithic and locked in their customers felt as they did. I think the same story is replaying itself with cloud data warehouses. And if you leverage more of a open lakehouse model or an icehouse, as we like to call it, you can save easily half the cost relative to a traditional cloud data warehouse.
How you have seen the evolution of the whole lake house concept, and how much role you see the community? And when we talk about community, there is no single community, there are communities, right? The vendors are driving, some maintainers are driving them. So talk about the importance of community driven innovation when it comes to lake houses.
I think this is a great example of where we all, regardless of how big our organization is, can learn from others in the community and what they're doing. So, just recently we had our Trino Fest, which is an annual event that we do that celebrates the community. And we have, high profile users of the open source technology come and present on how they're using it. So these are folks like Apple or LinkedIn or what have you that talk about how they use their architectures. And I think that's really beneficial because it creates a forum where you have like-minded peers that you can learn from. And one of the things that we've seen is the evolution of an open lake house, or an ice house is what we like to call it, which is really the combination of Trino and Iceberg. And we see that combination, Trino for the query engine, Iceberg for the storage. We see that combination just gaining in momentum and becoming really the de facto open data stack for your data warehouse. And this is really, user-led. It's not a concept that we created. In fact, probably the biggest criticism we received when we wrote a blog post maybe 6 months ago about the Ice House was that we were naming something that they were already doing. They were like, oh, this isn't new. This is already what we do. Well, that's exactly right. That's the whole point. We were just giving a label to what we were seeing already existing in the community. And that is this widespread combination of Trino for the engine, so that's the open engine, and Iceberg as the open format. Now, we do support other formats, but I think, this month, in the month of June this year, it's become abundantly clear that Iceberg is the winner for the simple reason that Snowflake is now embracing it, and even Databricks is embracing it in a major way, which was the one, competitor to Iceberg, right? They created Delta, which was the competing format, and they've now announced they're also going to support Iceberg. And so I think that makes Iceberg the de facto format. And with an open format, you want to use an open engine. And so hence, Trino and Iceberg and the Ice House.
Can you go a bit deeper and explain the concept of Ice House architecture and what is leading to this adoption or interest in it?
I think at its root, there is an element of economics driving this phenomenon. You spoke about it earlier that cloud data warehouses can become expensive over time, and I think as a reaction to that expense, customers are saying, "Whoa, how do I create an architecture that can stand the test of time? How can I create something that will be enduring?" And I think at the essence of that is this idea of optionality that we spoke of, which is I need to always have an option to go back to the open source. And so the combination of those factors has led the market to say, okay, are there any open engines out there, open SQL engines? Well, yes, Trino is by far the most popular open engine. And what's the open format that is going to become the dominant format? Okay, clearly that's become Iceberg. And so I think that's the reason for the connection and the combination. And by the way, this actually goes all the way back to Iceberg's original creation. When Netflix created Iceberg, it was immediately paired with Trino, or Presto as it was known back then. And that pairing has continued since then. So in a way, it was created to be used with an open SQL engine, just like Trino. And so that's been the combination from its earliest creations at Netflix. So I think that's the idea. Now, what we're trying to bring to bear as Starburst is to make that easy. Again, that's part of our value proposition is we want to make this Ice House easy. And that means, building in Iceberg maintenance. So how do you maintain these tables? How do you do compaction? How do you ingest the data into tabular format, into Iceberg's format in the first place? So these are the types of features and capabilities that we've been adding to the product to help make an Icehouse architecture really, really easy.
How does Icehouse, open source, and this community-driven approach help in mitigating some of the challenges, problems that interoperability, compatibility can create?
First and foremost, this architecture, this Icehouse architecture, is storage compute separated. You have compute is the query engine part, and Iceberg, is the storage part. And the beauty of that is you have two components that are interoperable with different things, meaning that you could use Spark to access Iceberg, or you could use Trino to access Delta or Hootie, other formats. And so these are interoperable. And so even though Trino and Iceberg are a wonderful combination, you have the flexibility to mix and match these pieces, which gives you a lot of leverage as a customer. So for example, let's say that you were using Trino, or you're a Starburst customer and therefore you're using Trino, and you decide that we're too expensive. It's unlikely you'll come to that conclusion, but let's say that you think we're too expensive. You can now choose Snowflake to query that Iceberg table, or Athena on AWS, which also supports Iceberg. So you have a lot of different options. And I think when compute engines are competing, customers win. Whenever there's competition at any layer, the customer benefits at the end of the day, because we're going to be competing on price, performance, functionality, and at the end of the day, you win. As opposed to the traditional model, which is where everything is monolithic and stored in one singular proprietary system. And when you do that, you don't have that choice. And that choice is what gives you the benefits of competition. So that's really why I think this architecture is best for customers, is it gives them the leverage to basically swap these pieces and find the best combination for them.
Can you also talk about, of course, as we discussed earlier, that we kind of live in a data-driven world, but when it comes to especially Icehouse-like architecture, are there specific industries, use cases where you feel this is more suitable, or you're like, hey, no, if you're leveraging data, huge amount of data, you're extracting value from it, this is the ideal structure, or you're like, hey, these are the use cases which is suitable for?
I would start by saying, broadly, any data processing or data warehousing style use case is a good use case to look at this architecture for. So that's everything from doing the transformations as you're preparing data for analysis to actually, running ad hoc SQL queries and business intelligence, use cases directly on Trino. And that's what we do with some of our largest customers. They're literally running their businesses leveraging, Power BI or Tableau or ThoughtSpot, whatever your favorite BI tool is. You can connect that directly to Starburst or Trino, and then have complete access to all of your data, and essentially run, your traditional data warehousing analytics, your BI, your reporting, all through that at a much, much lower cost. So we really see a wide variety of use cases. That could be everything from, customer 360 to fraud detection, anti-money laundering, risk analytics of various types. And we serve pretty much every industry out there, from financial services to healthcare to technology to consumer to retail, you name it.
When we talk about AI or Gen AI LLMs, I want to look at from two aspects that what role can Icehouse architecture play in managing, running AI workloads? At the same time, are you folks leveraging Gen AI to make Icehouse architecture itself a bit better?
Maybe I'll start with the second one and then get to the first. We are using generative AI in the product for natural language to SQL translation. So at the interface level, you can express a query in English, for example, and have that automatically turned into a SQL query. And so that offers the opportunity to democratize access greater within an organization to those who maybe are not SQL experts. And we think that can be a big deal over time as these technologies become more widely adopted. To the core of your point, if you're building your AI strategy, it's only as good as the data that you train it on. And so we recommend that customers think first about their data infrastructure as a prerequisite to their AI strategy. And I think where we are in that AI journey is customers now want to leverage their own data. I think ChatGPT is basically a demo vehicle for what's possible. But for a customer, an enterprise, to really create compelling competitive advantage, they need to leverage their own data that they have. And that's where, having access to all of the data that you need, being able to store it and manage it at a low cost is really essential, because we know that generative AI workloads are going to consume a lot of compute. We know that they're going to consume a lot of resources. I mean, a lot has already been written about the electricity demands for these technologies. So building an infrastructure that's going to give you optionality, allow you to really manage cost performance, try to keep costs as low as you can. I think you really have to think about that first to build a strong foundation for your AI programs.
How much invested is Starburst in Icehouse architecture? That's number one part. Number two is, what are the things we can expect this year? Of course, you can share only what you can share. We'll talk about the things when they're ready, but just give us a glimpse. So this is like two, questions there.
First of all, we're super invested in the Icehouse architecture. We obviously are the leading contributors to Trino and have been since its creation. But also with Iceberg itself, we recently hired someone named Carl Steinbach, who's been involved in the Iceberg community since 2018. He's a member of the PMC. We're going to continue to get more and more involved in the Iceberg community to ensure that it meets its stated goals and is a open format for use by everyone and anyone. So we're very invested on the community side. And to answer the second part of the question, from a product roadmap perspective, everything that we're investing in this year is about making this architecture easier to use and more consumable. So really making it, a few clicks to analysis, and helping support the full end-to-end life cycle of running an open data warehouse. And so our expectation would be that a customer approaches this Icehouse and has a similar experience to what they would expect to a traditional cloud data warehouse. So making it that easy, but with a much more beneficial open architecture, for the customer.
Justin, thank you so much for joining me today and talk about Icehouse architecture, the whole evolution and the role of open source there. Thanks for great insights, and I look forward to chat with you folks again. Thank you.
Thank you.